Hey guys, and welcome to episode 2 of the Unarmed Podcast. If you guys tuned into episode 1, you know exactly what we are going to be getting into for today's episode. And for today's episode, I have brought in none other than Daniel Krystal.
Hi.
Okay, so Daniel has no idea still what
I haven't seen episode 1.
Right, you haven't heard.
Right.
He hasn't heard episode 1, and I haven't given him any clues as to what we are going to be talking about. So we're just going to get right into it. And the topic that I wanted you to talk about today is the accident, but through your eyes. Okay. So I wanted you, this is exactly why I got us drinks. I have a glass of rosé, Daniel has some beer. I don't really express a lot of emotion when it comes to that day. I think I told you last year was probably one of the first years that I really took time on my own to kind of go back to that day and reflect on every single thing that happened. Remember the nurses, remember everything, and kind of just let it soak in, because I've never done that within the past 5-6 years that it's been. Mm-hmm. And another thing is that this story has never been told through your eyes, not because no one wants to hear it, but because no one has ever asked what it's been like through your eyes. And I think it's going to be pretty powerful to hear how it was perceived through your eyes and what you saw and what your emotions were. So for this, I really want to ask you to try your hardest, and if you need to chug some beer, but I really want you to dig deep into your memories, go back to that day and tell us exactly what you felt. Tell us exactly what you remember. And there is going to be a point where I'm going to have to chime in, because we know that for a certain part of this day, you weren't there. Right. So I will chime in when I have to chime in, but I am going to give the mic to you. I want you to start from what comes fresh into your memory. Little backstory before he starts that day. Daniel and I were heading to the Rio Grande Valley from San Antonio. We were going to go visit family. And this was morning time. This was AM. I don't remember exact times. I don't know if you remember exact times.
It was early in the morning.
But yes, we had taken off early in the morning. And then, the accident happened during our drive. So I'm going to give the mic to Daniel. Just really try to go back to that day and I mean, I'm not asking you to cry or anything, but I really want you to try and feel what you felt that day, because I really think it's going to be something powerful for these people to hear, because it's been told through my mouth time after time after time, and it kind of gets repetitive. It gets very scripted for me, and I want to kind of change that. So go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, this trip was my idea. I brought it up, you agreed to it, and we decided to act on it. So we planned it for the next day. We took off, like you said, very early in the morning, and we had figured out that we were having an issue very early in the trip with your truck. I knew that something wasn't 100% right with the truck, but I said, what could it be other than something minor, since we've been using the truck anyways. So there was some shaking in the steering wheel, but it wasn't major. So going down the road, it wasn't too bad, but once we hit the highway, it started to get a little shaky. That being said, we probably got 30 minutes outside of San Antonio, Pleasanton. So 30 minutes south of San Antonio is Pleasanton. So we got around there, and very, very quickly, things got sideways. I remember hearing a very loud pop, and the pop happened, and 2 seconds later, we were spinning. I remember us spinning and we were facing oncoming traffic. We were going southbound, but the truck was facing north. And then I tried to correct the vehicle, and by then it veered off into the grass. And as soon as the vehicle started to spin back southbound, that's when the wheel of the truck, I guess, caught the grass, and that's when the vehicle started to flip. So that being said, that was probably the slowest part of the day, for me at least. It seemed like everything was in slow motion once that vehicle started to flip. I remember holding on as tight as I could while the vehicle was spinning, and I vaguely remember, the flips or how many times we flipped or anything like that, but I do remember everything once the truck stopped. This is a day that I will never forget. It's a very, very big day in my life, and in Krystal's as well, obviously. But when the truck stopped flipping, I looked over to Krystal and wanted to see if she was okay. And the first thing that I saw was she had her arm out of the window. The window was smashed out. Her arm was out. So, excuse me. I unbuckled my seatbelt and leaned over towards her. And I saw her arm hanging out the window, and I could vaguely see the damage to her arm. One part where I don't remember if she brought her arm back in before I got out, or I got out, went around to her side and saw her arm, and then she brought it back in. But at this point, once I'm outside of the vehicle, I tried to open her door. And I had already seen her arm by then, and I knew that it was in bad shape. And I kind of knew that it was going to be a very, very bad situation, just because of what I saw. Her arm was very, very crushed, and surprisingly, it was not bleeding. There wasn't very much blood splatter. There wasn't very much blood coming out of her arm. But that being said, I tried to open her door. Her door would not open. I remember Krystal saying, I need to get out of this truck. I need to get out of this truck. So what she did is she took her seatbelt out, or took it off, and she was able to climb over the center console and jump out of the driver's side. At that time, I think we sat down, and before we even sat down, there was people around us. There was people surrounding us, asking if we were okay. And we didn't really know what our situation was at that moment in time, but we were very lucky that once we sat down, a nurse had been driving by with her husband and basically saw the whole accident. She went into nurse mode, and she told Krystal exactly what to do. She found some towels in her truck, in our truck, in Krystal's truck. And she wrapped Krystal's arm. And by that time, I was kind of in shock, but I knew what was going on. And I do remember sitting behind Krystal and just holding her. I was crying. I was crying because I saw her arm. I knew that it wasn't going to be a good situation. So I was holding her, like I said, sitting behind her. We were both on the ground and I was holding her. And this is a part that I'll never forget. And I've told this to her before, so she knows what I'm going to say. And she goes, "Why did we have to go to the valley today? Why did we have to go?" You know, and that struck me because it was my idea. It was our trip, but it was obviously something that I wanted to do. I convinced her to go with me, and this happened. Granted, I don't blame myself for the accident. I've told her this. If we hadn't gone that day, she would have gone to work the next day by herself, and going down the highway headed to work, it probably would have happened anyways. I've ran that in my head a bunch of times. I mean, obviously I can't tell the future. I couldn't, predict it happening, but for me, I look at it as I was with her. It happened to us, and I think that I was supposed to be there for her that day. That being said, the ambulance showed up, and it felt like forever for them to actually show up. The paramedics came, took the towel out, saw her arm, and they wrapped it with bandage. But as soon as they took the towel out, I guess they noticed that something was, this was definitely not going to be something where they could just drive her back to the hospital. So I'm assuming that they called back to headquarters or whatever. They got the chopper to come out, and a helicopter came. They loaded Krystal up, and they wouldn't let me go with her. They said, "You're gonna have to find your way to the hospital and meet her there." And so, just like that, Krystal was gone. It felt like forever, but it happened really, really fast. And she was gone. She was gone. She went to the hospital. I don't even know how I figured out what hospital she was at. Already, I don't remember that because that's not a part that I really focused on. But as soon as that helicopter took off, I don't remember if I had Krystal's phone or if it was my phone, but I called Krystal's mom and I told her, I go, "Me and Krystal were in an accident, and I think you should come, because what I saw was it was bad. Her arm was really, really smashed, and I thought it would be a really, really, it would be important for her mom to know that what we went through, and she needed to come." So as soon as I called her, she was like, "Okay, I'm on my way." So she got in a truck with her husband, and they came straight to the hospital. I guess somehow they figured it out. Somehow I figured out what hospital that she was at, and I had to find a way there. So I only knew maybe one or two people in San Antonio, and my friend Meredith had just moved there, and I called her. I said, "Meredith, I need you to pick me up. I'm in Pleasanton, and me and Krystal were in an accident, and she just was medevaced out by the helicopter, and I'm stranded. Her truck is total, and I have no way of getting out of here." So she took off, coming towards me. The tow truck came to take our truck, and they took me to the area where they were gonna store the truck for the meantime, and that's where Meredith picked me up. By this time, we were traveling back to San Antonio. Krystal had been in contact with either her mom or maybe maybe it was I'm drawing a blank on the lady you Sarah or Laura. Laura might have been in contact with Krystal's mom and kind of giving her all the info that Krystal's mom was asking, because I think Laura was the first person to show up at the hospital and contacted her mom and gave her all the info or whatever. So by then we were traveling back to San Antonio. Krystal's mom called me back and she was crying, and I was like, "What's going on? Tell me what's going on." She goes, "Laura just called me and said that it's really bad and that they're probably gonna have to take off her arm." And I lost it. I was yelling, I was crying, and I threw my phone, and that was it. And I didn't want to talk to Krystal's mom. I just needed to basically let out what I was holding in as much as I could until Krystal left, and I cried until I got to the hospital. I was dropped off at my car, got into my car, figured out what hospital she was at, and I drove straight there. I went into the hospital. I think she was in I'm pretty sure she was in the ER. She was on a stretcher, like basically, I think in a hallway. Is that right? Were you in a hallway, or were you like in the ER off to the side a little bit? Everybody had their own little area, but you were kind of off to the side. They had wrapped you up already, right?
I don't remember where exactly I was when you got there. That's not a clear memory in my mind. I wouldn't be able to tell you if I was in the ER room or if I was in the hallway. Or
I remember you being in the ER, but also off to the side, kind of, because there was other people that they were working on, and nurses would walk by and you would talk to or try to talk to them, ask them questions, and excuse me, and they would answer vaguely, but then they were like, "The doctor's coming, this and that," and it wasn't even.
Now let me ask you this really quickly, because first of all, I have never. It's gonna be 6 years in August. I have never heard any of that, ever. I didn't know that he threw his phone, and I didn't know that my mom told him that, my arm was most likely going to get taken off. I didn't know any of that. This is the first time I hear any of that. And it kind of, it makes me sad that I never asked. I think a big part of it is that I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I didn't, it's so weird. But anyway, going back, do you think, because what you were saying right now was that I was pulling nurses aside and kind of asking them questions. Is that something you specifically remember, or is that something, because I know I remember that a lot, and every time I tell the story, that's something that I specifically say a lot, but at the same time, I do know that you weren't there, but this might be a different part, because I remember pulling nurses aside just to stay with me, because no one was with me. Is that what you're talking about, or this is something completely different?
No, so I remember you telling me that. So okay. You've told me that before.
Okay.
So when I got to the hospital, Laura had already gotten there and she was with you. So that was...
So this is different.
This is different.
Okay.
I do remember you reaching for nurses and asking them, when is the doctor going to see me, this and that, or do you guys have any idea when my mom is going to get here? I think that was a question that you might have asked as well.
And you see, I don't remember any of that.
Yeah. But like I said, I got there and it was like maybe 10 minutes after I got there. The doctor came. And they took you from the ER and put you they were taking you to the operating room. The doctor was talking to me and Laura, and they were kind of giving us the rundown of what they were going to do. And I don't remember if they handed you paperwork or something like that, or they handed Laura or me paperwork. But like I said, I got there, and then 10 minutes later, they took you to the OR, and that was it. Like I didn't have much time with you, and you went straight to the OR.
That I do remember. It was a very fast transition from when you got there to the time that they took me back.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to kind of go back and fill in the pieces that he's not able to fill in because he wasn't at the hospital at this time, and I kind of don't want that to be left out. But before I get into that, I kind of wanted you to finish your side of the story, and then I'll go back and input the missing pieces. But one thing, because you didn't really touch on it, maybe it's because you don't remember, but I wanted to see if you could go back and pull something. I don't know. But one thing that I always remember is that it was a male nurse or whatever he was referred to. I'm just going to refer to him as a nurse. Was getting me prepared. I don't know if he was the anesthesiologist or he was just someone getting me prepared for the OR. But he, and I know you were there, and I know Laura was there. You guys hadn't been told to leave yet. And I was crying because I already knew what was going to happen. I was getting ready to go into surgery, and I was scared. And he kept assuring me it's going to be okay. Like, don't worry, you're in good hands. And I wanted to see if maybe you remember that and maybe what you thought.
I remember that. I remember him also. I want to say I remember this. I don't know if it's just a memory
because I bring it up,
because
it's hard,
you brought it,
right?
but I do remember, or it's either me remember it or you, because you say it all the time or mention it a lot. Them asking you, can you move your fingers? Can you move your fingers? Can you move your fingers?
Okay, well, you're going back to
the emergency room.
No, are you going back to...
No, I'm talking about in the hospital.
Okay.
I think they asked you this in the hospital too.
Okay.
If you can move your fingers, and they asked you to move your fingers, and I don't remember seeing your fingers if you can move them or not, but I want to say that you thought you were able to move your fingers, and I think you asked him, like, hey, I think I'm moving my fingers. That's good, right? Like that's okay. Like that's a good sign that I'm moving my fingers, right? And I think they agreed with you, and they're like, yeah, it's a good sign or whatever. But obviously, I didn't see your fingers moving. I don't remember looking at your fingers or anything like that. So.
And you see, I remember that before the ambulance. Oh no! This is when the ambulance came and they were checking me out. That is when I remember that happening. Them asking me to move my fingers, and I could have sworn to God my fingers were moving, and it could have been me just being very hopeful that they were moving. But I am more than sure. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm more than sure that they told me, like, yep, they're moving. But
I don't remember if they did.
Yeah, I'm not 100%, and if they did say it, I don't know if they said it just to make me stay calm and feel better. Now, before I go and input the missing piece from when I was at the hospital by myself, I wanted to ask you, you told the story, but kind of what I was more so hoping to hear. You kind of hit some good points that are very important to hear, like the one piece where I asked you why. That part kills me every time. But I wanted to know if you remember how I was acting, or if there was anything I was doing. Was I shaky? Was I trying to laugh because, I don't really know these pieces. And I was wondering if you remember, like, was I trying to make jokes? Was I really scared and it showed in my eyes and my face? Was I looking anxious? Like, do you happen to remember anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I remember your face very clearly. You were definitely scared. I do remember you looking scared. You were asking a million questions. You sat still, but you weren't sitting still. You were not twitchy, but you were just very, very what's the word that I'm looking for? Just anxious. You were very anxious, and you obviously you weren't. I don't know if you were in shock or not. You could have been. I don't know. I don't know what that actually. Yeah, but it wasn't like super out of the ordinary. Like, you were still Krystal. You weren't acting any different. Like, I've seen you sad and I've seen you worried, and that's kind of what you're portraying there. You were still Krystal. You weren't acting any different than you normally would, but you definitely were anxious and just sad, because of what you just been through. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, both of us were, sad and scared and and anxious. I definitely was. So.
All right, so I kind of wanted to go back to the part where I was taken by the chopper to the hospital, and this is where Daniel wasn't allowed to come with me. I don't know if the cops told you couldn't come, or it was the men in the helicopter that told you couldn't come. I don't know who told you couldn't come. But flat out, you couldn't fucking come.
Right.
Yeah, so that made me more anxious, especially because, and you know this very well, I don't like to fly. Mm-hmm. I hate flying. And so to top off my arm being completely messed up and me knowing it, and then you put me in a helicopter and you're going to fly me to a hospital, I was a wreck. I mean, I clearly remember this helicopter making me so claustrophobic. Like, I felt like the space that they tucked me into, there was like not a wall or a ceiling. Like, I can't even explain it to you. I don't know if they stuffed me into this little area because that's how they stuff all their patients in case like something happens. They don't want them to be able to go any further than like this, how can I explain it? Like, I felt like the top was right here on me.
The only way that I can picture it is that kind of like a ledge, or they cut like part of the helicopter sticks out, which could be either for like a seat, and they just
let's say it like this. I felt like I was in a coffin.
Oh, fantastic!
Like, I if I were to try to get up, my head would immediately hit the top of whatever was on top of me. And it was just enough to where it fit my gurney. And then right next to me was the gentleman who was helping me in the helicopter, the nurse or whatever he was. Excuse me. Anyway, I get to the hospital and they immediately wheel me in. And they start cutting off my clothes. They cut off my shorts. And even with all this going on, like, in my head, I was like, there was dudes and girls around me. Like, a ton of people were around me with scissors cutting everything off. And I was pretty nervous that these guys were about to see my vagina. And that's just something I was worried about. And so they're cutting off my clothes. And then soon after that, they kind of took off what the lady in the ambulance had put around my arm. They checked it out, covered it back up. And that is when I was just stuck in a corner because other people started coming in from other car accidents, and I was told that these people coming in were a lot worse than I was and that I was going to be just fine. So I was pushed to a corner. Mm-hmm. And you have to remember, you weren't there. Mm-hmm. Laura hadn't shown up at this time. And if you're wondering who the fuck is Laura, Laura is, if you remember from episode 1, Laura is a part of the family that I used to nanny and work for in San Antonio. Laura was the first person my mother called to see if she would be able to go to the hospital and be with me, because no one was able to go and be with me at that time. So of course Laura showed up, no questions asked, but it did take a while in my eyes, and from what I remember, it took a while before she got there. To me, it seemed like I was there for hours by myself, which I'm sure that's not the truth, but that's what it felt like. And so as I was pushed into this corner, I don't remember a debate between doctors, like, yes, your arm is going to have to come off. No, we can probably save it. I don't remember any of that. All I remember is one doctor coming right up to me and saying, it's coming off. And I cried, I was sad, I was scared, and I begged him, do you think maybe, just maybe, that once you're in there, you can fix it? And, it's not that he wasn't sympathetic, but he just didn't want to lie. And he's like, I'll try, but more than likely, no.
Do you remember what he looked like?
I don't remember I can't even remember his face now if I tried. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what he looks like. And that was that. And so I kind of had to deal with that news on my own. I had a lot of time to get into my head and to just start thinking of everything that was about to happen in this new life that I was about to have because of this accident. And so I sat there I laid there, and as I laid there, I wanted nothing more than to just have someone be with me to kind of go through and sympathize with me what I was just told and this news that I was just given, and nobody was there. And I remember just pulling for nurses and being like, please just sit with me, stay with me. And they're like, we can't do that. And I begged and I begged and I begged, and not one single nurse sat with me or stood with me or held my hand for even a few seconds, which in that time is all I wanted, and all I probably needed was just someone to hold on to. And they didn't. And then it hurt me and it sucked. But when I think about it now, it's understandable. There's all these other people that are probably about to lose their lives, and I'm okay. And they had a job to do. So it seemed like finally, someone came in and they were like, someone's here to see you. And I was like, well, who is it? Is it Daniel? Is it my mom? And they're like, no, it's Laura. And at the time, it didn't click. It's like, Laura. And they're like, Laura Mormon. And I was like, Laura, yes. Please send her in. So she came in, and Laura, I have learned so much from Laura. I love Laura so much. She is another woman in my life that has been a very strong figure for me. She came in, no tears, no fear on her face, just one big smile, that big Laura smile. And she's like, how are you? Are you okay? Don't worry, I'm here. I'll talk to the doctors. I've talked to your mom. They're on their way. We're going to get this settled. So she was just very much in go mode. And, whatever I needed, she was there. I was hot for a while, and she kind of figured out a way to get the air condition to face me. She talked to the doctors. You know, she kind of even told them, like, hey, you told her you're going to take your arm off? Like, why are you lying? And he's like, I'm not lying. Like, it has to come off. And she's like, no. Like, there has to be a way that you can save this. So she fought for a second, too. She really tried to fight for it. But that doctor was pretty stern in what he was going to do. And
I'm sure when the doctor saw your arm, he already had an idea that there was going to be a slim to none chance of saving it.
Right.
To go into details, it was your forearm that was basically destroyed under the elbow, forearm area. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as soon as you were taken in, or it could have been after the surgery already, to jump a little bit forward, I remember speaking with the doctor before I forget to mention this. I spoke with the doctor who did the surgery, and he came to me and he actually showed me a picture of what your arm looked like after they removed it. And he said that he needed to go higher than where the damage was. Mm-hmm. Because if he didn't go any higher, then you would have to have multiple surgeries after that one.
Right.
So he went above the elbow to remove anything that was damaged below it, and then have the surgery, be done with it, and didn't want you to have any more surgeries on your arm. Mm-hmm. So, and he was very informative and said everything went okay, everything went good, and there was just no way of saving it. It was basically destroyed. I think you were the one who told me that they told you that it was basically like your arm being inside of a meat grinder.
Meat grinder.
Yeah. Sorry if you go back to Laura if you want to.
Right. Yeah, another thing that I always vividly remember is a phone call that I was told to make by a nurse in the ER. Laura was still not there, and I was just pushed into my corner, and this ER nurse basically comes up to me and tells me, like, listen, your mom does not stop calling. She wants to talk to you. You need to call her and talk to her. And I said, no, I don't want to call her. I don't want to talk to her. And it's not because I didn't want to talk to her. It's because I had finally stopped the crying on my own, you know, and I knew that if I called her and talked to her, I was just going to start crying all over again, because I wanted nothing more than my mother to be there with me, or for someone to have had been there with me when I got the news that my life was about to change. And I didn't want to call her. I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want to make her sad. And I didn't want to restart the emotions that were going in on my mind as well. And this guy was just persistent. He's like, you need to call. You need to call. So finally I said, just give me the fucking phone. So I took the phone. I dialed her number. And I don't know if it took a few rings or if she answered immediately. I don't remember. But she answered and she screamed. I mean, I don't know if she knew the number already and she knew it was me. I don't know how she knew. But she said, Krystal, what's happening? What's going on? And, you know, I just had to stay strong, not only for me, but for her. And I said, he said he's going to take off my arm, but I'm okay. It's going to be okay. And I kept it short. That's all I said. And I couldn't talk to her anymore because I was just going to start crying again. I was just going to get emotional again. So I gave him the phone and I was kind of like, there. I called. Leave me alone. So that was that. I called her. I told her I was going to be okay. And me telling her that I was going to be okay, you know, I didn't fucking know if I was going to be okay or not. I didn't. But I think I needed to say that to kind of reassure myself and prepare myself and let myself know that, yeah, you are going to be okay. And just give myself that reassurance that, nothing else is wrong. It's just your arm. They're going to take it off and you're going to be fine. You're still going to have your life. And what's funny is that same nurse that told me to call my mom, I don't know if you remember this or not when I told you, he reached out to me on Instagram and he's like, I can't believe I stumbled upon you, but if you don't remember me, I think I told the story. I may have told the story in the post because, I'll never forget that one moment in that day of calling my mother and him making me call my mother. And he reached out to me and he's like, that was me. I made you call. And he's like, and you know what? He's like, I'll never forget that day. He's like, I went home that day and I told my wife about you and that I made you call your mom. You spoke to your mom, and when you spoke to your mom, you told her that you were okay and that it was all going to be okay. And he's like, and that stuck with me and that stayed with me, and it's good to know that you are okay. So yeah, that was a memory I'll never forget. The hospital was fucking lonely until Laura came, until you came. But even when you came, I felt like it was a matter of seconds between you coming and me being thrown into the OR. And I've mentioned it before, but that man who prepped me for the OR, and I know I was crying because I was scared. I had never had a major surgery done in my life. I think the last thing I did was have my tonsils removed when I was younger, and that was it. I had never had a major surgery done. This was going to be the first major surgery I had ever gone through, and they were taking off a limb, and I was fucking scared. And he made me feel better. He didn't make me feel 100% again, but he did make me feel better. Just him reassuring me that I was in good hands. It was going to be okay. He's got me. And I won't forget him either. But I don't want to go into after I came out of the OR. We are going to leave that for episode 3. And more than likely, I will be bringing Daniel back on again because, to be completely honest with you, no one else was there with me, immediate family-wise, other than Daniel, my mother, my father. It was those 3 people that were with me day in and day out. Right after the surgery, it was those 3 people that were with me day in and day out at my apartment after I came home from the hospital. They saw how I did the comeback. They saw what I felt. They saw the emotions. They were there feeling everything I was feeling and going through that with me. So in episode 3, we are going to be talking about the comeback from the accident. How I came out of the surgery, how long it took me to come back to everything, to working out, to the job, to just how I felt overall and how I got acclimated to everything. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you tune in for episode 3, and we will see you next time. Have a good one.
I'm gonna have to check my schedule.
You ruined it.